We continue to follow breaking news here at CBS Sports, where Dan Hurley is staying at UConn and rejecting the Los Angeles Lakers. That's been confirmed by CBS Sports. Hurley again was the lead candidate for the vacancy in LA, but decided ultimately to stay with the University of Connecticut, where he's won back-to-back national titles, and now going to stay with the Huskies, seeking a third straight natty. Let's welcome in Matt Norlander, co-host of the Eye on College Basketball podcast. Matt, why do you think Dan Hurley ultimately decided to stay with UConn?
If I had to boil it down to one word, the word would be loyalty. He was offered more money to go coach the Lakers. He turned it down, of course, 2 months ago. Although discussions never got deep with Kentucky, he theoretically would have been offered much more money to go coach at Kentucky. He turned that down. So UConn's coaches turned down Kentucky and the Lakers in less than 2.5 months' time, which is a wild sentence to say out loud. But I think loyalty does mean something that's a lot to Dan Hurley. I think there were factors on this roster and with UConn's situation that mattered. I think the fact that his family is all based in the East Coast in Jersey City, I think that matters to him. And even smaller things that I don't think are that small, like Alex Karaban being a 50-50 NBA draft decision and ultimately deciding less than 2 weeks ago to come back for UConn for a third season to be the face of this program as it tries to chase a third straight NCAA championship. And Dan Hurley not knowing at that point that he was a Lakers candidate, and now putting his players in an awkward position in the program, which would have been in a very difficult position had he chosen to do this. So there's a lot of reasons why, but in talking to sources around the UConn program and around Hurley, the phrase Dan is so very loyal or something similar to that came up multiple times in people I talked with over the past 3 or 4 days. And I do think that sentiment, more than anything else, is what won out and why college basketball and the University of Connecticut got an absolutely massive win on Monday. Yes, UConn, which is no stranger to winning, got arguably nearly as big of a win, non-championship game aside, as it's had in the past decade by Hurley deciding to stay.
So anytime we have a college and pro connection, there's certainly a lot of layers here, and I do have some follow-ups, but because he's turning down the NBA for now, Matt, let me just button it up in terms of his ability to coach professionals here. In your opinion, just knowing Dan Hurley, what type of pro coach would he have been if he took the LA job?
Well, I wrote this in a column last week for CBS Sports. I actually think it would have been a great challenge, and a challenge Dan would have been willing to lean into, but that's not to say it would have been easy, because he would have had to have changed a lot of the way that he does his job and comports himself in games. And I had a few sources speculate to me that they doubted he would have been able to do that so quickly, particularly in such a pressurized situation. Theoretically coaching LeBron James in Los Angeles. The Lakers are not a great franchise right now. They're not that's on the upswing. They're not a team that's a year away from winning a championship. And so a lot of those factors, in addition to having an 82-game minimum grind of a season, perhaps Hurley needs just a couple more years to prep himself and be ready for it. So he could have had success. It might have taken a little bit, but I actually think this sets him up even better. And in talking to sources at the NBA level and the college level, I want to be clear about this. There were many people that were like, he's gone, man. He's going to take that job. They're going to offer him more money. It's LA. And if it doesn't work, he's going to have, another opportunity. There were some people that were saying that. But the people that were not, that were keying in on, here's the deal. He gets a new deal from UConn, and then who's to say that 2 years from now, the Knicks job can't open, or the Nets job can't open, or the 76ers job can't open, or you don't even know if it's none of those three. What about the Boston Celtics job 3 years from now? Yes, they're in the finals, but you just never know in the NBA. So let him have a chance to thrive at that level if a job opens on the East Coast, where he would be much more comfortable and much more in his realm. So I think Dan Hurley has a real chance to one day coach in the NBA. It could be a year from now. It could be 4 years from now. But ultimately, I think no matter what happens with UConn this upcoming season, he's going to be thankful that he pushed this off, because he might have a situation that's so much better for him moving forward if and when those other NBA opportunities come calling later this decade.
To your point, it could happen that Dan Hurley ends up in the association. We just know it's not going to happen today. or this upcoming season. All right, let's get back on campus and talk about the two-time reigning national champs. You mentioned how big of a thing this is for him to stay for that quest for a three-peat. But there's something that you said there. Maybe he goes to the NBA in a year or 2 or 4. And we know in college sports there's negative recruiting. You say, hey, Dan Hurley could always leave to the NBA. But as of right now, he's taking a stance and saying, no, I'm staying in the college game. Again, tell us how big of a deal this is for him to be able to stay on campus and what they're trying to do to go 3 straight.
Yeah, you mentioned the recruiting pitch. Dan Hurley gets to say, I turned down Kentucky and I turned down the Lakers to stay at Connecticut. So he has the greatest recruiting bargaining chip, in addition to, oh, by the way, I have 2 national championship rings back to back. So I think it is so massive for UConn's momentum as a program, because the quest for a three-peat, it is 2 things at once. It is real. It is possible because UConn has a roster that is in the top 5 realm, in my estimation, heading into the season. But it is also so very, 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 very hard to do. We haven't seen a men's D1 team do it, obviously, since UCLA in the 1970s under John Wooden. But with Hurley back, Arabam back, there's a freshman incoming that UConn fans are familiar with, but his name is Liam McNeely, who's going to be a key offensive piece this season. They've had good portal ads. Parish is a big for Michigan. Aiden Mahaney, of course, is lead guard. So is UConn going to be the preseason #1 team? I don't think that will be the case, but it should be a preseason top 5 team, and at worst will be a preseason top 10 team. That's a mortal lock at this point. And now they've hit this nice little window where they've got plenty to prove, because Alex Karaban is the only returning starter from last season's championship-winning team, but they still have enough talent there to validate them being relevant, a Final Four contender, a national championship contender, and now Tommy, just what a big picture boon for college basketball that you don't lose. I think this is another important part, and we'll get deeper into this on our emergency episode on Monday here on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. You don't have another instance of brain drain at the college level where you've had coaches that previously turned down pro offers, your likes of, Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jay Wright, Jim Boeheim. They no longer are coaching in the game. Dan Hurley is now emerged as one of the faces, if not the face of college basketball. And the fact that the sport, at least for now, at least for another season, if not another season 2, 3, 4, or 5, they don't lose him, I think is important for the overall health, publicity, marketing of college basketball, to keep a guy, and particularly to keep a guy who turned down, it wasn't like he turned down any job. He turned down the Lakers to stay in Storrs, Connecticut, and on the East Coast. And with that, the Huskies, now they ramp up and vamp up for what will be one of the more intriguing seasons and one of the most watched teams in the sport next year.
We got to hit a break, and we've got Gary Parish on standby. But before I do let you go, Matt, what's the likelihood that Dan Hurley might get a new deal with UConn?
That's a lock. He will get a new deal. I mean, I've been told by sources that they have been in some discussions about working on a new deal. Obviously, the very nature of being courted by the Lakers only enhances that. Couple sources indicated to me the target here for UConn is to get him at a minimum of $8 million annually moving forward. We'll see how quickly they can get that done and what the length of the deal is. After UConn won a national championship in 23, so last spring into summer, Hurley inked a new deal. You win back-to-back. Business changes, obviously, and he's going to get an even bigger and better deal there. It won't match the money probably that the Lakers were offering, but broadly speaking, my expectation is whenever a deal gets done, I would anticipate Hurley's new deal will be 6+ years and north of $8 million per year. We'll see what number that can be, because I can guarantee you the people that are around the UConn program, they want to try and get that number to 9. Wait and see if they can get them paid, and the staff. Close up on this, Tommy. I have to mention Luke Murray, Kamani Young, the associate head coach, and Tom Moore. Not only does Hurley return, he has the best staff in men's college basketball. So with them all back together, rallying again, it's why UConn will have a viable chance to do the near unthinkable. Let's go for a chase of 3 in a row.
Matt, great stuff. All right, let's bring in the other co-host of the Eye on College Basketball podcast, Gary Parish, joining us here on HQ. GP, what's your initial reaction to Dan Hurley staying on campus?
I understand the decision. To be fair, I would have understood any decision. This is a man who was put in a position where he had 2 amazing opportunities placed in front of him. But ultimately, what he chose was to leave well enough alone and to not mess with or walk away from an incredible opportunity. That opportunity, of course, the chance to to be the first man since John Wooden to win 3 straight national championships in Division I men's basketball. The Lakers, you know, they prioritized him, and they made a lucrative offer. The report from Adrian Wojnarowski, 6 years, $70 million, but that still would have only made him the second highest paid coach of basketball in the city of Los Angeles. Ty Lue makes more money than that. Monty Williams makes more money than that. Greg Popovich makes more money than that. My point being that it is possible Dan Hurley would have said no matter what. But I really do think if you're asking somebody to relocate their entire family to a different part of the country, to walk away from an awesome situation, to tinker with happiness, you do need to overwhelm them with money. And though the money is more money than most people will ever sniff, I was a little surprised that it wasn't a bigger number.
So anytime we talk about college coaches going to the pros, linked to the pros or whatnot, there's always sort of that, like, the college life versus the pro life, right, Gary? So in terms of Dan Hurley, what do you think makes it for him that he's now staying in the college game, where recruiting, of course, is a big factor there?
I'm not even certain this means that Dan Hurley prefers the college life to the NBA life. I just think it means that he couldn't walk away from this situation that he finds himself in right now, and probably understood that if he walks away from this, he will be walking away from something that he will wonder about forever. And yes, by staying, you know, there's another side of it where he's passing on the opportunity to be the head coach of the Lakers, to presumably coach LeBron James, and that is something that he might not ever have an opportunity to do again. But as many people have noted over the weekend, the NBA door is not closed on Dan Hurley. He's only 51 years old, and NBA franchises much closer to the place he is forever called home are going to open, you know, in the coming years. And so I don't think it's crazy to think Dan Hurley could pass on the Lakers, take a shot at winning a 3rd straight national championship, and however that goes, field other phone calls next offseason from NBA franchises. Eventually, as others have noted, you know, that Knicks franchise, the head coaching position will open. The Nets position will open. The Sixers position will open. The Celtics position will open. Perhaps not all of that's true, but you get the point. Dan Hurley might actually prefer the NBA lifestyle to the college basketball coaching lifestyle, and he might pursue that someday. But I think in the simplest of terms, he just could not get himself to a place where he could walk away from, in this moment, a chance to win a 3rd straight title at UConn.
That's an interesting point. You talk about him potentially going to the association. It could happen, just not happening today, GP. So then let me ask you this. How is the college basketball community reacting to the Dan Hurley news today, you think?
Everybody's thrilled. I mean, maybe not if you're a Providence fan or a St. John's fan, because you got to deal with Dan Hurley in the Big East. But broadly speaking, it feels like a win for college basketball. Now, I think it's a little silly to make it more than what it is. I don't think this means that college basketball is a preferable place of employment to the NBA necessarily. It just means that in this very specific set of circumstances, a man was presented with an incredible NBA offer and decided in this moment he would rather stay at UConn. So if I'm a UConn fan, I'm thrilled. And if I'm a UConn fan, I don't worry about tomorrow too much as I just celebrate today. But Tommy, if we're lucky enough to be doing this for a while, you and I will talk again someday about Dan Hurley being interested in an NBA job and being pursued by an NBA franchise. This does not end that. It just ends it for now.
No doubt. We're taking a look at his career profile. He has a chance now to add to that. Gary Parish on the Eye on College Basketball podcast, where there is an emergency pod with Matt Norlander on the way. Thanks, GP.
A man who knows a thing or two about the UConn Huskies, former Husky, our champ, Rip Hamilton, joining us now. How big of a victory is this for UConn?
Hey, Jenny, to be honest with you, I was just going through my daughter's stuff in her room trying to find her pom-pom because this is one of the pom-pom moments right now. I'm excited. I know everybody in the state of Connecticut is excited. Yes, this was a situation. This was a coach's dream when you think about coaching for the Los Angeles Lakers. Dan has done an excellent job for us at UConn. Trust and believe, after the national championship game, I had a lot of communication with all the heads of UConn, and I'm telling everybody we can't afford to allow him to go anywhere. When the Kentucky job came up, you heard all the rumblings that, hey, he might go to Kentucky. They have the money to pay him the type of big bucks that he will want to as a coach. And the same thing with the Los Angeles Lakers. Hey, $70 million, that's a lot of money. But when you look at college coaches these days, the guys are now making close to $10, $11 million a year. So I expect Dan to get somewhere around that from the UConn Huskies. So I think it's a situation to know where he's definitely put his imprint on the team. The team really follows his personality. We've been looking for a great leader like this for a couple years now, and his imprint is embedded in the state. So to come back and have the opportunity to try to win a third national championship, something that hasn't been done in a very long time, I'm just happy and excited that Dan's wife loves the state of Connecticut. Because when you hear about all the decision makers, you got to talk to the wife. You can't talk to Dan. And the wife loves Connecticut. The family loves it. So I'm happy for him and the family to be back at Storrs, Connecticut.
Building off of that, and yes, of course, the wife has a huge say in this decision, but what do you think it was that led him to decide to stay with UConn, not taking this job with the Lakers? You got to know him personally. What do you think it was?
I think his legacy. Yeah, I think his legacy. I mean, what he was able to do here at UConn. I mean, he took over a great program. You got to remember, this is Connecticut, a state where, you know, it loves its basketball. And after he left Rhode Island and come to UConn right down the road, we welcomed him with open arms, and we needed his personality, we needed his coaching style, and we needed his approach. I mean, he brought a sense of a great foundation back to the culture of UConn basketball. So when you look at all the great coaches in college basketball, and you say, who's the best college basketball coach in college basketball? You have to say Dan Hurley. If he goes to the NBA, you wouldn't be saying that he's probably the best coach at the professional state. So I just believe that his imprint, especially with these kids, he's all about development. I know we're living in a crazy space right now when it comes to the NIL and guys putting their name in the transfer portal, in and out of different college programs. But he gets it. He goes out and gets the right kids that are the right fit for the program. So I just think that with his ability to develop kids is first when you're talking about the great coaches in college basketball.
That leads me to my next question. What does Hurley's decision tell you about his comfort level with this ever-changing landscape, NIL, transfer portals? You just mentioned it all. It seems like he's right involved in it and comfortable with the direction it's going in.
Yeah, he's built for this. He's adjusted well. When you look at a lot of the veteran coaches in college basketball, a lot of them retired because they just couldn't deal with the climate with the NIL and how guys are leaving one school and going to the other, especially when it comes from a development standpoint. When you look at college coaches, when you bring in guys, especially their freshman year, a lot of times coaches ain't looking forward for these guys to play early in their systems. So they're always trying to develop guys. And now with the portal, it's hard to develop guys because if you're not playing, what do guys do? They kick rocks. They go to the next location. So I just believe that he goes out and recruits the right players. If you look at the guys that he's bringing in, the kid Lamb from Mount Verde, who's a 5-star recruit, a guy that can move without the ball, he fits what Connecticut is trying to do each and every night. You look at the kid Ahmad coming from Philadelphia, a big, strong, physical guard. Even though you lose Newton and Castle, you bring in another guard that is physical, that can play right away. So I just think he maximizes the portal well. He understands that, hey, you know what? We're going to practice. When you talk to college coaches around the country, I mean, it's all this load management. Teams don't practice that much. No, we're going to practice, and we're going to be in the gym. We're going to learn how to execute, especially in tough situations. He's not caught up in worrying about the kids getting caught up of him yelling at kids. He understands that he's the right mind for the kids. He's going to do what's right for the program and for the kids. So I think he's just a great fit for the UConn Huskies.
I got to ask about the Lakers now. Where does this leave them? What is next for them? Who are they going to be looking at?
Jenny, you know what? When everybody's talked about, hey, you know what, Dan should go to the Los Angeles Lakers. Let's go back a couple years ago when before Darvin Ham took the job. A lot of people around the league was talking about, with all the different coaching vacancies coming up, that the Lakers coaching job was probably the worst one to take. So you got to still think about that now, just knowing what they got on their roster, what are they going to do, what are the pieces that they're going to bring on this team to maximize LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So you got to go out there and get the right guy. Is it J.J. Redick? We don't know. I mean, J.J. Redick has a great mind for the game, but still understanding, hey, you know what? It's not just about him. It's about who they bring in and what pieces they put around LeBron and AD on the floor.
Rip Hamilton with the latest breaking news as head coach Dan Hurley has made the decision to stay with the UConn Huskies. And Ashley Nicomas of the Beyond the Arc podcast joining us now with this breaking news. A lot of people thought it was a done deal.
Yeah.
Dan Hurley going to LA to be the next head coach of the Lakers. Just found out right now that is not the case. He is staying at UConn. What are your initial thoughts on it?
I mean, there was a lot to consider with this job, right? There are pros and cons. If you're Dan Hurley, you're an East Coast guy, you have a family there, your career has been there, and you have a very successful tenure with UConn. I mean, you mentioned it all in the opening, a chance to go ahead and win another championship and be in the mix of names with John Wooden, the ultimate GOAT when we talk about college basketball. When you look at the side for the Lakers, you could see why they wanted him, right? He's a coach that has a lot of relationships in terms of players. You know, when you're a college coach, you tend to be able to relate to young guys in a different way. And when you talk about the Lakers, there's a lot of young talent on that team. And if you let the rumors that have been circulating kind of penetrate your brain, they're going after a guy named Bronny James. You know, you may have heard of him. Young player that's going to need a lot of molding, a lot of development. When you talk about college coaches, player development is what they do and what they do well. They constantly have young men coming in and out of their lineup. You have to know how to mold them. You have to know how to help create them into the players they're going to hopefully be in the league if that is where they choose to go. But there's also a lot that comes with that job, Jenny, as we know, and we can dive into that a little bit more. It's not just about coaching, and it's not as simple as the X's and O's. You're talking about Los Angeles.
You're talking about Los Angeles, and obviously a huge job. I believe Bill Ryder is going to be joining us shortly as well, so whenever he's ready, he can pop on our screen here. But he said there's so much. Well, actually, we'll welcome in Bill. Just
Hi,
like
Bill.
that, the magic of television. That's what I like to say. All right, Bill, what was your take when you've just found out that Dan Hurley is not taking that Lakers job?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was surprise.
All right, Bill Ryder, the magic of television, just like that. He's in and he's out. We'll get him back
some of that
shortly.
is because
Bill, you there? All right, Ash, we'll continue the conversation here. You said there is so much more than just taking on the job, the X's and the O's.
Yeah.
What goes into being the next head coach of the Lakers?
I mean, look,
there's a man named LeBron
there's a lot,
there, so,
right?
You know.
We're talking about the Los Angeles Lakers, so it's not just being in Hollywood. It's not just having the eyes and a different microscope on you. It's one of the biggest markets in the country. It's up there with New York. There's a different type of media microscope that is on you when you talk about the Los Angeles Lakers. Also, you have one of the best players of all time on that roster. He goes by the name of LeBron James. It's not like he is at the stage of his career where he's going to be open to completely changing who he is as a player, completely changing who he is as a leader. And when you talk about LeBron and you talk about the organizations he has been a part of, he has had a very hands-on approach, whether he admits it or not, to a lot of these organizations, from Miami to Cleveland and now in LA. When you're coming into that situation, you have to understand, as the head coach, you are a partner with LeBron James. You are not LeBron James' head coach. And for someone like Dan Hurley, who has a completely different experience in Connecticut with UConn, that's not something that's easy to get over. When you're as the head coach of UConn, you're actually coaching. You're actually responsible for what's happening on the court. You're out there screaming and yelling at your players and they respond to you. Nobody's screaming at LeBron James and he's going to respond to them. And if you do, it's going to be different. And in general, in the NBA, you're talking about grown men with families, with responsibilities that college players do not have. That is a drastically different approach in how you have to coach them. And that is why we have seen time and time again the transition for college coaches in the NBA is not always the smoothest. It's a completely different approach when you're talking about grown men.
A completely different role, that's for sure. We're going to try this again. Bill Ryder, our NBA insider, joining us now with this breaking news. Dan Hurley not taking the Lakers job. He's going to be staying at UConn. Bill, what are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is I'm trying to. I was the Dan Hurley of interviews a second ago. You thought you had me, and then you didn't, which is exactly what the Lakers thought. So I talked to somebody over the weekend who knows Dan well and had talked to Dan Hurley as he was walking into his meeting on Friday with Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka. And I was told that he was extremely conflicted then, and obviously he was, having turned the job down. And it began for me a process of believing that if he turned down this gig, which he has now done, it would be a very public setback for the Los Angeles Lakers. It's not usually out in the daylight going after someone like this, and that includes really big names. They wanted Hurley, they courted him, and then he publicly told the world, let me decide whether I want to be a Laker or not. That's absolutely his right, and good for him to make a decision that's best for him, his family. Everything Ashley said is 100% spot on. If you're the Lakers, though, now you got to go back to J.J. Redick, who you haven't technically formally interviewed, but have to explain to him why he's the second choice. James Borrego, I'm told, is someone they really like, but Borrego's become a really strong candidate in Cleveland. So who knows how that impacts his feeling on the job. So I think the main takeaway for me, after just getting past the fact that they offered a college coach that kind of money, turned them down, is how bad of a look this is for the Los Angeles Lakers, how publicly embarrassing, and to what degree it pushes back and or complicates their coaching search now is going to be really interesting.
And adding to that, I mean, think about this. Let's say you're J.J. Redick, right, or whoever they're going to go ahead and offer the job to at this point. You know what they were going to give Dan Hurley, so now you have a number. Now you have a time frame in terms of how long your contract is going to be. Now, everyone's fireable in the NBA. We've seen that before. But now you have a contract. Now you have a number. You go to the Lakers and say, this is what I want, or you go higher than that number. And the Lakers at this point have already kind of burned their bridge with option number one. And listen, the decision was his to make, and he went against, the decision the world wanted him to make and made a decision that was best for his family. But now you're in a sticky situation if you're the Los Angeles Lakers, because you can't play chess now. Now you're playing checkers, and you're no longer the one leading. And if I'm the Lakers, I'm like, dang, we really stepped in it this time, because now we are at the mercy of whoever we offer this job to.